How's it going, you guys? So in this video, I'm going to be once again talking about carbohydrates. So, listen, okay, obviously carbohydrates can be a part of a overall healthy diet. There's been quite a few cohort studies done showing higher intake of foods such as berries and citrus fruits, for example, tend to result in better health outcomes. Of course, it's correlation and not causation, but it just shows that, you know, in regards to cohort studies, people who eat more citrus fruits and blueberries tend to be healthier. So, what that means is that you could probably eat those foods and become healthy, considering the fact that those groups in cohort studies do the best. Um, but at the same time, that does not necessarily mean that these foods are required for optimal health. It just means people who eat those foods tend to be healthier. Also, we know that the blue zones, well, for one, there's this theory going around that a lot of them are operating from inaccurate birth records. So some of the birth certificates might be, a lot of them don't even keep birth certificates. Like those in Okinawa, like how do we even know that their birth dates are actually even real? But anyway, some of the longest living and or healthiest societies on the planet seem to eat a large amount of carbohydrates from whole plant foods. Um, and so what that means is, again, it does not mean that higher carbohydrate intake is necessary for health or that carbs are healthy. It just means that people can survive on a higher carbohydrate intake and have good health outcomes. It means that carbohydrates can definitely be healthy. Although, at the same time, especially when we're talking about the blue zones, the majority of them, they also eat a lot more animal foods than what is reported in a lot of these books, these fad diets like the Blue Zone Solution and some of the news coverage around the blue zones and their diets. A lot of the data was taken during Lent or during World War II, and so their nutrition data is not accurate. For example, Okinawa, their data was taken during a food famine. Nonetheless, those are great examples of societies that have had higher carbohydrate intake and better health outcomes. Same thing goes for Japan and Asian countries. Um, so, this idea that carbohydrates are toxic is not completely accurate. Now, at the same time, when I talk about carbohydrates, especially as of lately, um, they're kind of neutral and context dependent. Like, if you have type 2 diabetes and you're eating a high carbohydrate diet, especially when it's high in polyunsaturated omega-6 fats, you're just asking for progression of your disease, regardless of those carbs are coming from whole foods or not. I believe a lot of people, especially in America and westernized cultures, but just in everywhere now in the world, they've been consuming large amounts of refined carbohydrates for a very long time, and also they've been saturating their body with polyunsaturated omega-6 fats. And so, essentially, their body is extremely intolerant to carbohydrates, and insulin resistance is extremely common due to these factors. So, whole food carbohydrates might not register as healthy for these people because they've ruined their metabolic health with these refined foods for so long. So obviously, under, I guess you could say natural conditions where we weren't eating these fats in high amounts, even from animal foods, and we weren't eating these refined carbohydrates, whole food carbs probably didn't have the same detrimental effect. But now, because so many people, they've consumed such a horrible refined food diet, these polyunsaturated omega-6 fats tend to make people insulin resistant, and it takes a number of years to burn through these fats and change them out in order to restore insulin sensitivity. And then on top of that, their insulin receptors and the beta cells of the pancreas, they no longer function the way that they would have before those refined foods. And so within that context, and then also considering the fact that people develop insulin resistance 20 years before it shows up on a hemoglobin A1C test, and by that time it's already been in full swing, because doctors don't really test fasting insulin, which would predict diabetes about 20 years before it happens. The point here is that carbohydrates and their health effects, it's not just a matter of, it provides antioxidants, especially considering the fact that antioxidants are not even essential to be consuming from the diet. Like, your body creates its own antioxidants endogenously, made plenty of videos about that already, so you don't need antioxidants. And then pretty much any vitamin and mineral need can be met by low carb foods, or even just meat. You really can survive for decades without consuming plant foods at all. But if you're convinced that you need plant foods in your diet for fiber and vitamin C and this and that, or even antioxidants, there's hundreds and hundreds of plant foods that are low carb and fit ketogenic criteria, and can provide you with whatever nutrients you think you need from plant foods. And then on top of that, all you really need to survive are essential amino acids and fatty acids. And even the essential fatty acids, a lot of experts, debate on that, on whether, you can consider EPA and DHA or arachidonic acid essential from the diet. But the point here is, as far as I'm concerned, like, your body needs nothing from plant foods, but everything that animal foods contain are essential. So, I've had people in my comments, they're freaking out at me because I say carbohydrates and even plant foods are not essential for survival or even for living healthfully for decades. And they freak out at me, and they're like, oh, so you're saying that sausage and bacon is healthier than sweet potatoes and brown rice? And, I can't help but feel like those people just, like, I don't know why they would ask such a foolish question. That doesn't even make sense. Pretty much any food can be healthy as long as it's providing you with the essential nutrients you need, and it's not aggravating any health problems you have. A lot of people, they have food intolerances where broccoli and brown rice and those types of things tend to set off things like arthritis, Hashimoto's disease, Crohn's disease. And when they remove those foods, their condition goes away. Of course, they can replace those plant foods with other plant foods that might not really trigger their symptoms, but the point here is, for many people, those foods cause disease, and they're not really providing them any substantial benefits anyway. How much essential fatty acids and essential amino acids are in a cup of brown rice? I think there's like 7 grams of protein total from 1 cup of cooked brown rice. 7 grams of protein. And I mean, to reach the government's daily recommended amount, which is not even optimal, it's really not, you'd need approximately 10 cups of that. And I mean, think about how, like, I don't know about you watching this video, but I think most people would feel pretty bloated. I know for me, for sure, I would have extreme intestinal discomfort. Even eating 1 cup of brown rice, but 10 cups of brown rice to get my essential amino acids. And then, not to mention, that's about 70 grams of amino acids, and they're not even in optimal amounts. And that's only reaching the minimal daily intake set by the government, which is really to prevent protein deficiency over the long term, and not necessarily to maintain optimal function of the neurotransmitters, restoring skeletal health, joint health, and maintaining muscle mass. point here is that does not make any sense, especially considering the fact that I could eat half a pound of beef and get the same amount of amino acids and experience zero intestinal discomfort whatsoever. And I think that most people who actually try this type of eating, most people will find they have zero intestinal discomfort. Depending on their fat and sodium intake, of course. Some people eat too much fat, they experience diarrhea. Some people not enough, and they experience constipation. Anyway, point here though is regardless of what you think about plant foods, carbohydrates, they could be a part of a healthy diet. For some people, they might actually cause trigger symptoms that, makes no sense. Oh, I got to eat these plant foods for antioxidants and fiber. Yet it's causing you autoimmune illness, or triggering the symptoms at least. A lot of people that might have autoimmune conditions and triggered by plant foods might be suffering from a bacterial infection of the intestine. Regardless, though, it makes no sense to consume a food if it's harming you. And can you really say that a food is healthy if when you remove it, your acne goes away, or you remove it, psoriasis goes away, or you remove it, Crohn's disease goes away? Most people that they insist that plant foods are healthy or that carbohydrates are necessary or this or that, they're not thinking critically, they're not considering the full spectrum of health. And I think it's because most people don't actually understand exactly how comprehensive the effects of food really are. They don't understand the full picture, and it's probably because, number one, most people commenting on YouTube comments, for example, they just started their health journey, especially those who promote veganism. Most of them, they're within the first couple weeks of veganism, they're on the hype train, and they haven't realized how nuanced all of it is. For me, been there, done that, was vegan for a whole year, done paleo multiple years, done keto for about 2 years, carnivore, and the full spectrum of different styles of nutrition. And so I understand that it is highly context dependent. And even this idea that carbohydrates are not necessary, that may be a fact. But there might actually be, I'm starting to open up to the possibility that many people might actually do better with at least a little bit of carbohydrates in their diet. And, I'm confident that, and I think the main point here that I want to drive is that even if you feel better on higher carbohydrate intake, most people probably don't need as much as is promoted. Especially in circles of athletes, people say, oh, you need 300 grams of carbs a day to sustain your brain health and muscle function. It's if you remove all carbs from your diet, your brain is still going to create enough glucose for your body's still going to create enough glucose for your brain and muscles and your glycogen stores. So to say you need more than 100 grams of carbs a day is kind of ridiculous, considering you can remove all carbs and still maintain healthy functioning of your entire body. That's just ridiculous. There's really no lower limit for carbohydrate intake, but past a certain point, you're not really benefiting anything. I think a lot of people, they believe they need more carbs than is actually factual. And, to think you need to be eating, fruit or snacks or something every couple of hours to maintain blood glucose is just ridiculous. You've got to be pretty damn sick to not be able to go 8 hours without eating carbs. It's just ridiculous. If I don't eat oatmeal every 3 hours, I start to feel hypoglycemic. That means you probably have diabetes if that's the case. It's just ridiculous. So, overall, if there's a objective to strive for, I'd say it would be to become metabolically flexible. To be able to, and Rob Wolf's been pushing this idea for years of metabolic flexibility. In fact, I had watched a lecture he had done, I think at PaleoFX back in October of 2017 or something. back in 2017, he was talking about metabolic flexibility, where, you can, if you want to fast for 21 hours, you can do that. If you want to eat carbohydrates like on one day, you can do that and then bounce back. You want to be low carb for a whole week, you can do that. Getting your body to be able to run on multiple different fuel systems. And in the ketogenic communities, there's this really big push for that, if you eat a little bit of carbs on, like, you're going to kick yourself out of ketosis and you have to spend 4 weeks trying to readapt again. When you look at the physiology behind using the body's use of glucose and glycogen, and you understand that it's going to be producing glucose and glycogen either way, you realize anytime you eat carbohydrates on a ketogenic metabolism, all that it's doing is fulfilling that glucose need that it would be fulfilling through gluconeogenesis. And then once it burns through those glucose again, it's going to continue producing glucose from gluconeogenesis, only it's going to also produce ketones, which is a state of nutritional ketosis. So, it's not like you get knocked out of ketosis and it's this crazy detrimental long-term thing if you consume a little bit of carbohydrates again. So yeah, carbs are not necessarily unhealthy. If you have a metabolic condition or an autoimmune disease, you might want to look at restricting some of these foods. It can be a part of a healthy diet. There's a lot of evidence towards, people getting good health outcomes despite carbohydrate intake. Also, there's a number of pharmacologically active substances in many of these foods. Certain polyphenols found in blueberries, things of that nature, can increase brain-derived neurotropic factor, which has a definite benefit towards brain health. But you don't need to be slamming down blueberries every couple of hours. Keep your blood glucose healthy, and if you do, you're probably diabetic and would benefit from a low-carb approach. So, and then the goal should be metabolic flexibility. But either way, your body has essential amino acid needs and essential fatty acid needs. And most of this whole idea that you need carbs for thyroid and hormones can be heavily debunked if you're being intellectually honest. So with all that being said, leave your question in the comments down below, and I will talk to y'all next time.